Okay, so what if I told you that the mastermind behind the internet's most notorious black market, a guy sentenced to basically die in prison, was just set free? This isn't some movie plot. This is the very real story of Ross Ulbricht. And believe me, it has a twist that makes you question just about everything you think you know about justice, technology, and politics. And then, boom. Just like that, with a post on Truth Social, the story took its most unbelievable turn yet. On January 21st, 2025, Donald Trump announces a full, unconditional pardon for Ross Ulbricht. A move that just floored everybody, supporters and critics alike. So how on earth did we get here? To figure that out, we really need to go all the way back to the beginning. So yeah, it is a stunning reversal. And it raises the central question for this whole explainer. How did the man behind the internet's biggest drug bazaar, a guy who was supposed to be locked up forever, just walk out a free man? 12 years. That's it. He served just 12 years of a sentence that was specifically designed to make sure he would die behind bars. To really wrap your head around this, we have to rewind. We have to go back to the birth of the Silk Road and get to know the man who created it. You see, the Silk Road wasn't just some back-alley criminal enterprise, at least not in the mind of its creator. It was born from a really big idea, a radical, some would say dangerous, libertarian dream. At the very heart of this story is this massive contradiction. On one side, you've got Ross Ulbricht, the Eagle Scout from Austin, Texas, a smart guy with a master's degree in material science. But on the other side, there's his infamous online persona, Dread Pirate Roberts, the shadowy kingpin running a billion-dollar drug empire on the dark web. How does one person end up being both? Well, in his own words, right there on his public LinkedIn page, Ulbricht pretty much laid out his whole philosophy. He said he wasn't just building a website, he was building a whole new world. He saw Silk Road as a real-life experiment in pure free market economics, a place where people could buy and sell anything without the government sticking its nose in. No regulations, no taxes. It was his version of ultimate freedom. And to pull this off, he built the first marketplace of its kind. The Silk Road ran on something called the Tor network. Now, what that does is bounce your internet traffic all around the globe, which makes you almost completely anonymous. And for money, all the transactions were done in this new, hard-to-trace digital currency you might have heard of, Bitcoin. This mix of total anonymity and untraceable money created, well, the perfect storm for a global, unregulated black market. But, you know, a party like that can't last forever. Federal investigators were closing in, and the fall of the so-called Pirate King didn't start with some brilliant hack or a dramatic raid. Nope, it started with one surprisingly simple human mistake. So it all came down to this one tiny thread, pulled by an IRS investigator, of all people, a guy named Gary Alford. He noticed that one of the earliest promoters of the Silk Road online used the screen name Altoid. So he starts digging, and he finds a totally different forum post from years earlier where the same Altoid username was asking for some programming help. And, this is the kicker, he left his personal email address to get a reply. And that email, it contained his full name, Ross Ulbricht. Game over. That single, tiny mistake led the FBI right here, not to some high-tech supervillain lair, but to the science fiction section of a public library in San Francisco on October 1st, 2013. Now, the FBI knew the biggest risk was Ulbricht snapping his laptop shut, because that would encrypt everything instantly. So they got creative. Two undercover agents started having this loud, dramatic fight nearby, like a couple breaking up. Ulbricht, like anyone would, turns his head to see what's going on, and in that split second, another agent swoops in, grabs the open laptop, and just like that, the whole operation was done. And for the thousands of people all over the world who tried to log onto the Silk Road that day, this is the image they saw. The Silk Road was officially out of business. But the end of the Silk Road was really just the beginning of a whole new chapter for Ross Ulbricht. This was the chapter that would see him transform from a federal prisoner into a genuine international political cause. So, in 2015, a jury found him guilty on all counts. And these charges were no joke. I mean, we're talking about running a continuing criminal enterprise. That's a charge usually reserved for, like, mafia bosses. The prosecution's argument was simple. This wasn't some philosophy class project. It was a digital drug empire, plain and simple. And the sentence? Wow. it was absolutely staggering. 2 life sentences plus another 40 years on top of that. And crucially, no possibility of parole. The judge was crystal clear. This sentence was meant to make sure he would live out the rest of his life inside a prison cell. His legal options just vanished. The Court of Appeals said, nope, the sentence stands. Then, in 2018, the Supreme Court wouldn't even hear his case. So as all these legal doors were slamming shut, a political one started to creak open. His mother, Lynn Ulbricht, started this relentless Free Ross campaign. She argued the sentence was just way over the top for a nonviolent, first-time offender. And that movement found some really powerful allies, especially in the libertarian and crypto communities, who started to see Ross as a kind of political prisoner. And that grassroots movement brings us right back to where we started, to the final, absolutely unbelievable twist in this story, the presidential pardon, and the massive political firestorm it kicked off. What started as a mother's fight for her son grew into a surprisingly powerful political machine. A really vocal and motivated group of libertarians and crypto fans basically turned Ross Ulbricht's freedom into a make-or-break issue for their vote. They organized, they lobbied, and they made it very clear that they would throw their support behind any candidate who promised to free him. And, well, they found their candidate. At the 2024 Libertarian National Convention, Donald Trump promised to commute Ulbricht's sentence, and after his election, he made good on that promise with a full pardon. For his supporters, like the Libertarian nominee Chase Oliver, this was a huge political win. But for critics, as publications like The Nation pointed out, the irony was just glaring. A president who had, time and again, called for the death penalty for drug dealers was now setting free the man who created one of the biggest drug trafficking platforms the world had ever seen. So the story of Ross Ulbricht, from Darknet kingpin to a pardoned man, it leaves us all with this really fundamental question, especially now in our digital age. When a new technology moves so fast that it just completely outpaces the law, who gets to decide what's pioneering and what's criminal?